So welcome, thank you for coming out. Before we get started and I introduce our speaker for this evening, I wanted to acknowledge the Morris Educational Foundation and the MEF. I've been in this district, fortunately, for 18 years. And as long as I can remember, the MEF was always there, supporting teachers, supporting our students, our educational programs, and community outreach, such as presentations like this. So before we get started, I just wanted to thank the MEF again for sponsoring this event. I think it has a lot of value, and thank you. So I've been in education 25 years now, 21 in public school, 4 years in private education. And I think back to how I used to run my classroom, the way I instructed my students, the way I graded and assessed them. I think back and I look at and I remember those long spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets of grades I used to have, right? And I think about the number of assignments I gave, the numbers, the percentages, the grades, down to the 100th of a decimal point, right? And I think back at all that and think, wow, what a terrible teacher I was. But at the time, I didn't feel that way, right? I was engaging my students, I was doing all these things, but one thing stuck in my head all of those years, and every time, without fail, I would look at my grade book at the end of a quarter or semester, a year, and I would put a grade in for a student, and I would think to myself, that grade does not represent what I knew about that student. But that was the system, right? That was the system we used, that's the system that everyone used, that's how we calculated learning. But that always resonated with me over the years. It's like, why is it that the grade that I was assigning at many times and often didn't represent what I knew to be true about that student? So about 5 years ago, I was the director of STEM education in this district, and I kind of came across this book here, Grading Smarter, Not Harder. And along with our Science PLC group, we started a department read. And we dove into the book, the strategies, and a lot of the examples in that book that we were dealing with in classrooms. Because what we realized in education now is that the things that we were asking of our students and the things that colleges and universities were asking of our students and professional employment companies that were asking of our students had changed. We dove into that book, and what do you know? A global pandemic hit, right? And I think I say that because that turned everything that we knew about education upside down. And it put a lot of things under the microscope, student grading and assessment to be one of them. So 3 years ago, now as the director of curriculum, I went back to this textbook. I said, we need to start engaging our staff. If we want to move forward in a direction in this country, really globally, we need to look at what we're asking our students to do and how we're assessing them. And I just looked at the author of this book and I decided to reach out to him. Never thought he would actually respond to me. What do you know? This gentleman from Canada actually responded to me. So 2 years ago, we started a partnership. I said, Myron, I really want to change our approach in the Morris School District. We have a diverse population of students. How can we provide for them the opportunities that they need to be successful, not just in our classroom, but in the world today? He said, Brian, I've been working with districts like this all over the country. And I'll introduce a little bit of Myron's bio in a little bit. So we started working together in this district. We put together on-campus professional development sessions, virtual PD sessions. I think we had countless Zoom calls together. And the reason I reached out to Myron is because I knew his message was practical and would resonate with our teachers that were on the ground in the classroom. So, here we are today, and that brings us to this evening. And I thought Myron was back working with our teachers over the past 2 days, And I thought, partnering with the MEF, what a great opportunity to get him in front of our staff, not just for professional development, but also in the evening with our community, parents, local educators, and that brings us to this evening. So I'd like to introduce Myron Dueck this evening from Summerland, right? Summerland, British Columbia, Canada. Myron has worked across the United States with school districts in Mexico, New Zealand, and has recently transformed the entire grading system in the province of British Columbia, correct? And is the author of both of the books you saw out there, Grading Smarter, Not Harder, and Giving Students a Say. So this evening, I'd like to introduce Myron, 5 things that parents should know about education in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I didn't know that it was surprising that I would actually email somebody back, but I don't know how most Canadians treat you, but let me use that as a segue right away. I'm going to show you where some of the resources are going to be from tonight, but with a crowd this size, any of you can reach out to me after this meeting at myrondueck@gmail.com. It'll go up on the screen, or my website, myrondueck.com. There's not a lot of Myrons doing this. In fact, there's not a lot of Myrons. So I'm pretty easy to find, and I promise you I'll write you back. So if you see some slides today that didn't go into the folder that we're going to show you where it's going to be online, and those kinds of things, and I know some of you work with schools here, some of you obviously are here as a parent, don't hesitate to reach out. If you don't hear from me, give me a little nudge, but another email. Say, hey, you said you'd write back. That's right, I did. So I want you to know that in my travels, I've done parent nights in Seattle, Grand Forks, Macedonia, Bulgaria. Did a parent meeting in Recife, Brazil. About 25 parents arrived by helicopter on the roof of the hotel in Recife. There's some very wealthy families there, and they arrived. I don't know how many. They may come here by helicopter tonight. And it was a bit of the United Nations. It was pretty interesting because they were live translating it into Portuguese, and so half the audience has headphones on, and there's a guy at the back who will just tell me to slow down or I can speed up because he's translating it live into Portuguese where people had their headphones on. So a little bit like speaking at the UN. But you know what? Why did 250 parents show up in Recife, Brazil on an evening? It's because they probably feel a bit like you do tonight. I'm a parent. I want to make the best decisions and help my child make the best decisions. I care. And I think being informed is better than not being informed. And if that's why you're here tonight, I'm with you. That's exactly what I would do as a parent. And I want to know what's going on. So without further ado, 5 things parents should know about 21st century education. Brian mentioned I'm from Summerland, British Columbia. I grew up in a little tiny town called Rosenort. I was a student there. Just to let you know how rural Rosenort is, it's a little farming community. I graduated with 13 people. We didn't have a theater like this. And we were as far from a university prep school or anything like that as you can possibly get. My mom sent me this picture not that long ago at all. She goes, Myron, I found this picture of you and your older brother Kevin getting ready for school. And the first thing I asked her was I bringing all of my worldly possessions with me on that first day, or what? And then the second thing I wondered is, why did we never get the royalties, right? We were the original Teletubbies, and we didn't even know it. So anyway, I'm going to speak tonight as a parent. I'm also going to speak to somebody who was a student. We've all been students. Maybe we still are at a community college or getting another degree or whatever. So now I'm in Summerland, and it's a nice community. It's got. If you're ever thinking of anywhere to visit in Canada, it's got vineyards, a nice lake, and all that. So honestly, if you come out that way, make sure you let me know, and I'll give you some advice or some pointers. I had this up on the opening screen. That's our rink on our yard, so we're true Canadians because we have our own skating rink. My son now manages it. He's 18 years old, and he said, Dad, I'll just take over it. and he's doing a lot of that. So it's a lot of fun. We learn lots from it, but make sure you bring your skates if you come in the wintertime. So you've already found out a little bit about who I am, but I think this is really important on an evening like this to know, so who is this guy anyway? Like, I'm gonna devote an hour and a half to this conversation. Who is he? So, pre-pandemic, first off, I've taught 20-some years in the classroom, and I'll get to that. But most recently, I run Myron Dueck Educational Consulting, along with my wife. She's an accountant and she's a travel agent. That's what she does. And I was vice principal of assessment and innovation, but like Brian said, along comes COVID, and I wasn't able to go from school to school, even in our own district. I wasn't traveling anywhere. So my phone rang, and it was the vice principal of our district saying, do you want to come back as he's the superintendent of our district says, do you want to come back and be vice principal of Summerland Secondary? I was like, no. I'm just going to hide out at home and wait for this pandemic to blow over and write another book or something. And he's like, no, we need a position. And then I was like, I always remember my grandpa. My grandpa was working at a logging camp in the Second World War, and you could always hear in his voice that, there were the guys of his generation that were on the beaches at D-Day, and there were the people who weren't. And I guess I wanted to be on the beaches a little bit. So I said, no, let's do this. This is a pandemic, and we're trying to figure out how to run schools at this time. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. And then they said, would you please teach a senior leadership class? I was like, I wouldn't have said yes if you'd thrown that on the table right away, but I taught that too. So I've been a teacher very recently, and tried a number of the things out that I'm going to be speaking about tonight. More recently, they've reinstated me in our district as Vice Principal of Assessment, Innovation, and Communicating Student Learning. Now here's the deal. We are getting ready for a monumental change in British Columbia. We're going to move all of our K-9 schools, so that's going to be probably roughly around 400,000 students, thousands and thousands of teachers to a brand new scale. There's not going to be any percentages, there's not going to be any letter grades. It's going to be a scale like this, okay? So I'm going to be on stage here once in a while. This scale, so just imagine this for a second. Your child comes home with a report card, and it says, grade 7 math, and there's going to be a comment by the teacher, but then it's only one of 4 of those words. You're either emerging, developing, proficient, or extending. The words underneath here I think are important. You show an initial understanding of the concepts and competencies. You're going to hear quite a bit about this tonight. Competencies. What are the skills you can exhibit? It doesn't say memorizing information there. Information is really important. It's really good to know stuff. Okay? When we're talking about where somebody's living and you can cite a place on a map, or you can say, yeah, I know where northeastern India is, and I know where the cities are near there. It's nice to have that kind of conversation, right? Knowledge is important. But we're looking for people who have either an initial understanding, partial, complete, or sophisticated. And I also want you to know that in that lowest level, which is emerging, we're being encouraged to write our reports in strength-based terms. Talk about what you can do, what you are able to do, and that'll lead the report. And we are hearing from a group, we've been piloting this in our schools now this year, we're finally hearing from parents who just cold call us and say, this is the first time I have received a report card about my child that's positive, that says one positive thing. And I think we haven't heard from that group a lot. That is a pretty disenchanted, disengaged group of parents, generally speaking, some of them, and they're calling us up going, whatever you are doing here, this is a good thing. Because listen, we know our son struggles in school, okay? You don't think we know that? We're abundantly aware. But hearing what he can do and what steps he is taking is super important. In 2006, my principal asked me if I wanted to go to a grading conference. He walked into my classroom and says, hey, Myron, want to go to a grading conference in Portland? I said, no. Sounds awfully boring. Like I'd probably have dental surgery sooner than go to a grading conference in Portland. And he's like, no, we should go. I said, no, I'm not going. I'm not interested. Thank you. Take Scott. He's looking for a contract. He says yes to everything. And there's like, I hope this is okay to say this because it's the truth. He says, but we have Portland Trailblazers basketball tickets and there's talk of a group up. I was like, oh, yeah. Okay, I'll go, right? We might be going to a brew pub after this, right? We didn't. Did you mention that in your intro? In the conclusion, if anybody's going to leave early, you're not going to hear about that. It'll be something a little more informal, hang out with the Canadian. And so I said, you know what I said? I said, fine, I'll go, fine. And I'm sitting at the back of that Portland grading conference, and a bit like Brian talked about change, there was a guy that went to the mic, which I'm not going to share all the details, but he challenged me around my teaching. I was at the very back, I did not think I wanted to listen to this, and it struck a chord, and it changed. I decided to change a couple things about my classroom. I decided to go back and change the way I approached homework, and I decided I was going to make learning targets really clear for my students because I thought they would appreciate that. And then I got a call from a school in Port Alberni, British Columbia, and they said, we hear you speak to teacher groups. I was like, well, I said, I went back to the conference the next year, and I took 45 minutes to tell a few teachers what I was doing. I said, well, we hear you're an expert on unit plans. Expert. And then my email comes in from the University of Kentucky, and the first line is, we understand you're an international expert on the topic of sharing learning targets with students. I said, I'm not that. I mean, seriously. And like, my principal turned to me and he goes, well, where do you live? I said, Canada. Yeah. What were you speaking about? Unit plans. How many people there were speaking about building their own unit plans? None. Looks like you're an international expert on the topic of unit plans. So that's how life works. So what's happened since then, you guys, is this, and I have visited a lot of places. I've visited a lot of schools, international schools, charter schools, independent private schools, semi-private schools, but most of my work is with public schools in the United States. That's the bulk of it. So I'm going to bring a lot of opinions from the things that we've done. One of the, it's not clicker now, but let's see if this will work. Just discuss that latest idea with a friend next to you, okay? This doesn't happen very often. Got power. There we go. How's that? Okay. So last little thing about my journey, we're going to dive into 5 things we should know about education. So I want everybody to know I've been 25 years in this thing called education in both New Zealand and Canada. I've taught grades 4 through 12. I know by meeting folks, I think I met almost everybody in here as you were coming in. We have people coming in who have students or some children in elementary and some people with older children. And so I've spent time at grades 4 to 12, 7 of those years at what you would call middle school, 14 of them at secondary. 4 years now I've been in the district role of assistant vice principal for communicating student learning. Been a parent of 17 years, and 3 years on our provincial grad committee, and that committee was a large, as Brian was referring to, as being a part of this change. I was one of many people who've been moving towards a different system in British Columbia. But I want everybody to know, before we go one step further, there is something way more important to me than any books or any speaking engagements or any travel, and that is, first and foremost, I'm a parent. And that is my ultimate job on this planet, is to be a parent. And that's our Labradoodle over there, Ryder, who never sits quite normally. My wife, Tracy, that's my son right there with the number 6 jersey. He played provincial volleyball for British Columbia, and he tends to wear that jersey almost everywhere he goes. My daughter, Sloan, there, is in grade 11, and that's me. More important than writing any books, I started coaching my son and his friends in grade 7, and we went on to win the first Valley Championship for our school. That's me there. I should say, my wife, I don't know if she'll like me saying this, probably the happiest day of my life to win that championship. Marrying my wife, Tracy, is right up there too. It's called Almost Tied. She wouldn't even have a problem with me saying that because she was crying her eyes out that day when we finally won that. So that's my son Elijah there, and there's a bunch of guys on their tippy toes, and that's why everybody looks the same height. That's cheating. So, My daughter's a dancer. I don't coach her in dance at all, but she dances 5 nights a week. That's also impacted my views on homework a little bit. She's just pursuing her passion, and she gets home almost every night at 8 or 9 o'clock, and she's got to spend about an hour on that homework, usually. She's a very, very capable student, extremely good at math and sciences, and it's probably where she wants to go, but her first choice is dance. I've never shown anybody this before, but both my kids are fluent in French. I want you to know that. We can be in a cab in Europe, and the cab driver speaks French, and they can completely articulate where we're going to go, where we're going to meet, how's it going today. And I attribute that to their middle school French teachers they were in French immersion, and they did not grade their homework. What they did is they strongly encouraged my son and daughter to learn their French at home in the evenings, because they're going to get assessed in the class. Grading that homework only means they're going to copy their worksheets off somebody else. I know they would do that. Okay? They're good kids and they're ethical and all that, but when, I copied off friends when homework was graded. Maybe I'm the only one in here that did that. But they're fluent in French. I can take very little credit for that, but I'm very much into learning and teaching with my own kids. They're both capable welders, okay? We have a welding shop, and we shot a video a few years ago with ASCD with my daughter making her own bed, and my son has recently built a trailer that we haul behind our ATV, and they both do that. I'm a believer that we should have multiple skills. I'm a believer that you should be able to do something that's your passion and something that's maybe beyond what you might do for your regular employment. Twice welding has kept me employed when I didn't have a teaching job. So, with that in mind, I want you guys to know something, and that's when we dive into our 5 things here right away, I'm going to share quite a few templates with you. So what you can do is you can go to myrondueck.com, and sometimes when people say go to my website, the next thing you know they're trying to sell you books, or the Myron Dueck collector mug, or the Myron Dueck collector spoon. None of those things are going to happen, okay? They won't. I will not contact you. You have nothing to worry about. You can just go to myrondueck.com, okay? If you go there, I encourage you to visit Resources and Tools. That's where I'm going to put your folder, okay? So when you click on Resources and Tools, and you just scroll up a little bit, right there, Morristown High School Parent Night. As I visit other places, that's going to go down a little bit along the web. It's going to scroll down a bit, but you can always find it. I'm going to leave it there for a long, long time. If you go to All Handouts Can Be Found Here, you click on the word here, and it's going to open up my Dropbox site, and there will be some documents there for you, okay? All right. Okay, so let's do this. I'm kind of excited. I'm excited about this one. I spent a lot of time on this, so where's our first stop along the way? We need to develop competent students. That's what we need to I've been talking for a little while, and the research suggests you should give people a chance to say something to someone near them every once in a while, or your brain goes to sleep. Okay? Same with kids, same with parents. In 27 seconds or less to the person beside you, how would you answer this question? How would you describe a competent student in today's world? Someone who's competent as a citizen of this planet. What would that look like, okay? So I'll give you about a minute. That's going to be 27 seconds per person, okay? Ready? Here we go. Just find someone to chat with. Go. Well, that's 27 seconds. I read a wonderful book, if you're at all interested in these kinds of topics. The book's called A Beautiful Constraint. It's written by Mark Barton and Adam Morgan. And they say that whenever you give people a constraint, like 27 seconds, It increases motivation because there's a tension involved there, like, we gotta get at this. So, are there any, I'm just curious what maybe some themes that came up in this room. You can just maybe belt them out. I might repeat them so that everybody can hear them. But any thoughts out there? Sorry?
Applying your learning.
Applying your learning.
Apply what you've learned.
Yeah, okay, taking what you've
You
learned.
said problem solving. She said problem solving when we were talking.
Problem solving, applying what you've learned. There's a hand back there. Time management skills, for sure. Well-rounded person, as we talked about over here. Self-motivated. Curious. Oh, that's my cousin Alex, who runs the largest implement dealership in Canada, says the number one thing someone should have is curiosity. If you've got curiosity, you're well on your way. So, with that in mind, it makes me wonder. I'm going to show you something right now that I've been challenging our school district to think about. Is this going to be our scale, or what if it looked like that? Right? What's your goal? When you're really learning something, when you're learning one of your hobbies, or you're tackling something that's of great interest to you, do you ever walk around telling people, I'm an expert in that, or I'm perfect? No, typically you're diving into something new. So I think that sometimes we're beginning in our learning, and sometimes we are partially there, and then we get a little stronger and we're complete in that learning, and then, if at all possible, yeah, I'd love to get to the point where I'm sophisticated. I'm making a pretty good pizza dough right now. I am. Like, I'm pretty happy with it. But you know what I'm diving into when I get home? I'm going to make potato terrine. I just read about it, saw it on YouTube the other day. I got to try that. I've never done it before. I'm going to be completely emerging on like Saturday night. You want to email me? Ask me how it's going. I'll let you know. Okay? Because I think this is how learning works. I think learning is more cyclical than it is linear. And when you want to dive back into something, it can work that way. I'm going to share with you a school that I work with in Monterrey, Mexico, and they use something called learning loops. And when a student feels that they've arrived at something, now they have to plan for where they're going to jump in again into something that's new. It's a nice concept to think about when it comes to learning. So, number 2. Okay, some of these will take longer than other things. This is a big one for me. Universities are after competent and knowledgeable students. Turns out that they're also changing how they grade students, and this is going to be one of our stops along the way to talk a little bit about homework today. So, for starters, and what was your name again? Gina. Gina, you said this apply, right? So I want to introduce you to Scott Harkness. Scott Harkness is a senior biology teacher at Penticton Secondary School. And I was vice principal at the time there when he was trying something. He was trying to flip his classroom. And some of you might be familiar with the flipped model of education. He would make 8 to 10 minute videos that his students would watch for homework. Okay, it was just to watch some basic information. He might be explaining something. So he'd say 8 to 10 minutes of homework a night. All you have to do is watch the YouTube video. Some students watched it on the way to school on their phone or whatever. Because when they get to class, he's going to flip his classroom. And what they're going to do is they're going to have activities and hands-on learning and interesting things to do when they get there. So he had some well-intentioned colleagues, I'm sure, going, Scott, it's not what you should be doing. He's like, why not? Well, you need to get them ready for university. Okay, so what should I do? You should lecture to them. You should have them take notes. You should have them be copying down what you say. It's going to get them ready for that. So what Scott did is he reached out to every school within 1,500 miles of our high school. Every single university department head, and he wrote them and said, very simple question, and that is, so what type of students do you want? The first professor to write him back wrote him a 7-page email. And here's an excerpt from that. Have a read. You guys see it at the back there? We want to move away from content acquisition and move towards skill-based, process-oriented, and collaborative learning. Interesting. And then he opens up another email from another professor, and Gina, in here you're going to see this reflected, right? We want students to get into the habit of examining their own thinking and apply what they've learned in a novel context. think for a long, long time, when they set the foundation of schools like this in 1916 or 1918, it was set upon a model of, I'm gonna tell you what to think and what you should know, and then on a certain day at a certain time, I want you to tell that back to me. We've had that as kind of a rough model for quite some time now. And what's very interesting to see is that's shifting at the university level. So, Lawrence Summers, former president of Harvard, said this, something to think about. You have to teach people how to learn because the knowledge pieces themselves, although some things are going to remain, other things are going to change. I don't know if I agree with him that anything you learn, I would challenge him that if he was going to join us at the pub after this. I'd say, like, seriously, anything, or do you mean most things? So I don't expect you to agree with everything I put on the screen tonight, because I'm not sure I always agree with it, but it's something to think about. And then, I mean, seriously, what kind of hick school would be bold enough to try a 2-level grading system? I'm telling you, we're going to try a 4, and we think we're being pretty, what's the word, adventurous, right? So what school would try 2? Oh, MIT. You've probably heard of that little shack up in the Northeast, hey? Like, a few people go to school there, and they're all proud of it. At MIT, we revel in a culture of learning by doing. In 30 departments across 5 schools, our students combine analytical rigor with curiosity. Whoever mentioned curiosity, there you go. Curiosity, playful imagination, appetite for solving the hardest problems. Oh, there you go. An appetite for solving the hardest problems? I bet you're not going to walk around saying, I'm an expert, I'm 100%. No, I'm trying to solve a problem that's one of the hardest we have to solve. Check this out. You can go here. If you're having a glass of wine with some friends and you happen to be talking about this and they go, that's not true, 2 levels. Yeah, it is. Go to MIT's registrar's office, click on the first year, okay? This is the first year policy at MIT. Before we get to all that, it's worth noting MIT's, get this title, forgiving first year grading system. That's an interesting word, forgiving. What are you guys going to do over there at MIT? Well, students either pass the class or receive no record that you were ever here. Oh. And you know what? I couldn't believe it, so I phoned them myself. I said, like, seriously? And the registrar goes, yeah, it's like you were never here. That's almost spooky, right? Okay, come on, you're gonna change that, right? Yeah, in the second term. So the very first term, if your children's feet hit the floor at MIT, they're gonna meet a professor who no longer says, turn to the person beside you, turn to the other person beside you, 2 of you aren't gonna make it. They're not saying that anymore, okay? They used to with the bell curve. Now they're saying, we're gonna be here for you. We want you to try some courses that maybe not have been your thing. Yeah, but I've never taken this before. Don't worry. You'll either pass it, or there'll be no record you were ever here. Okay. Then in the second term, we're gonna move you to an ABC, or no record at all. And then, check this out. Students may designate up to 48 units to be graded pass or no record basis after their first term, and at any time during the course of their study. That's brand new on their website, by the way. I changed this today because they've added that. They've been doing this for 4 years. It was called experimental grading, where you could try something and then you could take the pass or no record. But now they've extended it to your entire time at MIT. At any point you want to try something that you're not sure of, we want you to feel confident in doing that. What's our purpose? We want to ease your transition here. But just try finding a high school in North America that says to their grade 9 students, I want you just to come in here for the first month. We're going to give you some feedback. We're going to have a few tests, but we're not going to count anything. We're just going to let you get your feet on the ground here first. We don't. Not a single high school. But MIT does it. So be careful when people tell you, oh, but the universities. The universities are doing whatever they want right now. whatever they want. But I think it's mostly our high schools that are kind of caught in the middle right now, trying to play by an old set of rules because they're feeling compelled to or required to. This grading system is designed to ease your transition from high school by giving students time to adjust to factors like increased workloads and variations in academic preparation, participation. It's not just MIT though, folks, and we're going to get a whole lot closer to home here in a second. Letter grades on the way up, why some University of California departments may use alternatives. Check this out. We're talking about University of California, Berkeley, Santa Cruz, Irvine, and at least one other one that's listed in here. They might de-emphasize or even ditch the 8F grading scale. They want to rethink how they're assessing student learning. They stole the idea from MIT of a pass or no record grading. They might even let students choose which assignments get the most weight and which ones get less. Interesting. Scroll down a little further. Some departments have begun using two-stage exams. Oh, tell me more about that. Students take a standard individual exam before taking a group test. So now, and I've been talking to these universities about this, you'll take your individual exam, and then you might, as a group, be called upon to solve some kind of problem. Now, instead of giving you a group score, because you might just be contributing like crazy, and they're just kind of hanging out, afterwards, what you would do is you would write a reflection on your group experience and what you learned as a team and what you achieved. So we've been trying this in our school district, two-stage exams, and we're having a lot of success with them. I'll give you a quick example. A human geography teacher does a regular exam, and for the second day, he says, bring a good pair of shoes tomorrow. We're going to take a little walk. They do a 30-minute walk through the community. Students are required to take 2 photos during that 30-minute walk that when they get back to class, after visiting with people along the walk, they will write, how is that photo a manifestation of a key concept we have taken this year in human geography? Transfer, right? To apply that. Which picture am I taking? Which picture am I taking? I don't know. Well, what picture should I take? I don't know. What do you think I should say about it? I don't know that either. So you're going to have to wean you off being told what to do and how to do it all the time. Princeton. That's not far from here, is it? Close by, I heard. What's Princeton up to? Well, Princeton's got an interesting one. And this is like, no offense to Princeton, like I'm not rooting for the Californians or MIT. This one's a little bit more confusing to me.
The personal profile section of your UBC application is your opportunity to tell us more about you and your experiences beyond academics. The short essay questions need to be answered.
I don't know what is going on. That is like my next slide, but, I mean, listen, none of this is your fault. I have never had this, but let's go to this one and see. Okay, so I have a video coming up on the next one. That's the video that started, but it's not even on the slide, so I don't know, it's never happened. Princeton is bringing in a pass, defer, or fail system, which they have. And you can choose at least one of your subjects per term that you will choose to have just a pass. Not an A+, A minus, those things, just pass. Well, how well do you do? They won't even say. You can pass the course. Or you can defer it. It's not going your way. You can defer it for 1 year till you improve on it and study it a little more, or it will then it'll eventually shift to a fail. So it's like this. It gives you time to adjust as well, and you can defer that, or you say, listen, I don't think I'm going to get the A+ I really need. I might just get a B or a C because I have never taken advanced photography before. Relax. That would be a pass. Doesn't matter if you're A+ or a C. They're both pass. Interesting. This is the video that started a moment ago. This is an interesting one. You know how many universities, and maybe some of you know some people who've already had to do this? I didn't have to do this when I was going to university. Write a personal profile or shoot a personal profile video. Anybody heard? Give me a little wave if you've heard of these things before that universities are doing. Maybe a handful. Check this out. This is what UBC, University of British Columbia, put on their website. This is also being done at Brown, at Yale, Cambridge, all over the place. Okay? Check it out.
UBC application is your opportunity to tell us more about you and your experiences beyond academics. The short essay questions need to be answered in depth. They're definitely not something you want to rush through. Like your grades, your personal profile has a significant impact on your admission, so read over the questions carefully and take time to think and reflect. Your answers will set you apart from other students who also have high grades. Look at all of your past experiences, big and small. What and how did they teach you about the world, about yourself? Maybe you're interested in nature in all of its forms. Or maybe you picked up a hobby because a loved one inspired you. Your transcript tells us about what you have learned in school, but not what you have learned in life. This is where the personal profile comes in. What have you learned that you will never forget? What represents your achievements, passions, and experiences best? How have you grown and how has it?
I'll let it keep playing, but anything jump out at you in that? How about your transcript will tell us what you learned in school, but not what you've learned in life? This person is supposed to submit this and watch this. It will be graded by 2 independent graders, and it makes up 20% of your application to UBC. So not only do the strongest academic students get in now, we've seen this in our school, but there's a lot hinging on this personal profile. So what have you done to better your community? How would you make UBC a better place for other people? Questions like that. So we're going to take a break in a second. I want to hear your thoughts on universities, but I now have my own story to tell about this, or at least that of my son. So my son's applying to go to Vancouver Island University. He wants to be a natural resources officer. There's 300 people that get first selected out of from a 12-page application process. Then it gets scaled down to 75, and then they interview all 75 people, and 25 get in. He didn't get in on his first try, okay? He was filling out this application, and here's one of the questions. Describe any of your previous training or experiences, volunteer work or recreational, related to natural resources management and protection. Please provide specific examples when possible. So he brings the application to me, and he's like, Dad, for him, his first question was, Dad, what did you do when you had questions like this on your university application? He said, I didn't. Nothing like this. We sent a transcript in, sent some money in, and hopefully you had the grades to get it. That's how it worked. He was, I kind of wish it was that way. I said, I don't know, hang on. So he says, what on earth am I supposed to write about here? He said, and then the next question after this, just so you know, is who has inspired you to enter natural resources management, and why have they been an inspiration for you? I said, well, you have to talk about Dueck Penny on that one, Elijah. Oh, you think I can? Yes, Elijah, you need to talk about your life. So I said, what have you done? I don't know. Let's brainstorm this now. What have you done, especially during COVID? He walked up to me during COVID and he said, whatever we do, Dad, let's not let these 2 years go to waste. Let's do something that we haven't done before, that we never had time to do. And I said, fine, I'm in. What? Elk hunting. So the other thing he did is he started his own woodcutting business. And I said, Elijah, and by the way, just in case I don't want to offend anybody with the elk thing, we've never got an elk. Okay, we've had no success. Yeah, so I could have got one with a camera, but didn't have the right horns or whatever. So Elijah runs his own woodcutting business. He does a lot of it by hand with a buddy that lives next door to us. We've spent weeks trekking the Kootenai Mountain in search of the right elk. He's fished the Yukon River with one of the best people who fishes the Yukon. He's fished Alaska extensively. Doug Penny is right there. This man is one of Elijah's most special people on the planet. This guy, I'd never done anything with elk, and he said, when I was Elijah's age, a guy came along and he taught me how to call an elk. And he said, I'll pay it forward. I'll pay it forward for your son. Elijah, I said, remember when we went looking for the people that went missing and you volunteered for Penticton Search and Rescue? And you know how you know the backcountry on the quad? Yeah. And then also talk about your time as a captain on the volleyball team. Talk about those things. So I want everybody to know here, and I want all the parents, especially the ones who came in with really young children, start a digital portfolio if your school doesn't do it, okay? Start a digital portfolio of what your children are into, what their passions are, what their interest areas are, and that'll be very, very valuable stuff. I encourage schools to have their students start building digital portfolios. In British Columbia, we're required to, okay? You must build a personal portfolio which tells you one of three things. How have you been a communicator? How have you been a thinker? And how have you looked after yourself and your community? Okay? One of those three things you have to report on. So there's a lot going on with this. And universities are a massive shift. Has anybody seen shifts in the people you know going to universities? Anybody bringing a story in with them here today that they could tell, give us a quick snapshot? Yeah?
Well, my daughter applied to art school. She had to go beyond for AP art class. And there's something called the Parsons Challenge. You had to take a piece that you've done and convert it into something else.
Take one of your own art pieces and...
Take one of your own art pieces and develop it into something else, staying within the theme.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that had to go in, and they gave you X amount of weeks or when your original portfolio was due to get that in if you wanted to go to school.
Yeah. So, while we're on the topic of universities, how many people have ever heard of a professor checking the nightly homework for university students? Anyone? I haven't. I went to university. I didn't have anybody check my homework. I studied a lot outside of class. I poured through books, and I studied and studied, but nobody was going to give me a grade for bringing something in the night after showing them that I had read. Does anybody else have a similar experience of any kind? Yeah? So I think while we're talking about universities, we should talk about this. So what are we supposed to do about this thing called homework? The first question I like to ask any school that I'm working with is, what's the purpose of it? That's the first question you need to ask yourself. What's the purpose of homework? Most teachers will tell you it's to practice your skills at home. Okay, so why are you grading it? Well, if I don't grade it, they won't do it. Okay, but how do you know who's doing it? I don't. No. Like, mom could be doing it, friend could be doing it. If you don't switch your stuff up from year to year, you just take your older siblings' things that they did when they were there and just use that, okay? There's probably a reason why the researcher, John Hattie, he wrote the foreword to my most recent book. He's one of the world's preeminent researchers in this area. He studied 150 things that impact student learning. And I want you guys to know that this font is very, very small. I'm not expecting you to read this. At the very beginning, it's called Teacher Estimates of Achievement. You know what that means? That means that the teacher believes that if they do enough PD if the teacher really believes that their students can do this, and they will find a way for that to happen. They don't blame socioeconomic background, they don't blame that they have a job in the evening. They don't blame class size. I've done those things. I blame some of those things. But teacher estimates of achievement. My students can do this, and by God, I'm going to pull them through it. That's the number one thing that can impact student achievement. The next thing is collective teacher efficacy. When a group of teachers comes together and they believe they are the most important and powerful force in that student's life, that is the second most powerful thing in education. And third is student self-reported grades. Can we get students to report on their own learning? Can they tell you how they're doing, rather than assessment just being done to them? That's what prompted me to write my most recent book, is that right there, self-reported grades. Interesting. So let's see where homework is, shall we? The further over the line goes that way, the more powerful it is. The hinge point is right about here, you guys. Anything that's further over than where my hand is right now is something schools should probably spend their time and money on. Anything that's going to be from right about here and this way is not something you should spend a lot of your time and money on. Okay, let's have a little look. They've studied a lot of things. You get down to the negatives. What's over here? Television, parental deployment to a military theater, ADHD, okay? Where's homework? How far up do we have to go? Oh man, not very far. Homework is right between mobile phones and home visits. That's where homework is, okay? It's 0.29. Anything 0.4 and above is strong. 0.29 isn't. So now know this. 0.29 is a combination of elementary, middle, and high school data. It's much more powerful at high school. Homework does matter when you are practicing and learning things in, like my daughter is right now, pre-Calc 11. She does homework almost every night, and it can be very effective with an important caveat. Don't grade it, okay? The moment you grade it, what do? If you're grading something that someone's going to complete someplace else, what do you do the moment you attach a grade to that? Anybody? What might happen?
They don't take risks.
They don't take risks. Cheating?
Means you don't trust them, that's what I read.
May not be maybe there's no level of trust there. I thought it was only in British Columbia that students copied homework off each other. Does that happen here? All right, somebody just said that. And I said this earlier. I asked my own son and daughter, okay, honestly guys, when grades are awarded for homework, do friends copy off each other? My daughter was, of course they do, Dad. Like, how far is your head buried in the sand? Like, of course they do. So I'm just asking. So, look, I hope everybody hears me, including the teachers in this room and the folks from other schools. Can you just pretend I said 4,000 times that practicing learning outside of the classroom can be very valuable, okay? Notice I didn't call it homework. I called it learning outside the classroom. What if we changed the term of it? I'd like you to do some learning outside the classroom. I'd like you to reinforce your learning. Because there's at least 4 reasons, which I'm going to be pretty quick on. I'm going to make sure these go into your handouts later, that if you're having a conversation with some friends or you want to ask somebody in the educational community about this, feel free. There's 4 reasons to question the grading of homework. Here's one of them. Cramming and trying to learn something in a very short period of time typically leads to strong performance data, but it doesn't lead to strong learning data. If you want to look that stuff up, you go look at Cepita's research out of MIT about spatial effects in learning, or you look up Bork and Bork's research out of UCLA. Both of them are very, very compelling. This leads to inflated grades. If your son or daughter or your child brings in homework, they get a really good score on that, but they didn't actually learn it. That leads to grade inflation, because their grade no longer reflects what they actually understand. And lastly, this is what I'm talking about with that performance piece. Well, did you learn it? Or did you just quickly put it down on a piece of paper? Because the research around performance versus learning is incredibly interesting. And if you're like, if you email me later and go, Myron, I really want to read into this stuff, I'll send you things. I just didn't put them all up here tonight. Number 2. Anybody played around with ChatGPT yet? Give me a little wave if you've been tinkering with ChatGPT. Okay, a few of them. Anybody here having the foggiest idea what ChatGPT means? Okay, a few people. ChatGPT, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. It's an AI open software which you could go sign up for it right now. You can put any question in it, and this AI software will speak back to you as though you are human. Okay. You could say, ChatGPT, can you please write a letter to my wife over missing her 40th birthday? And you get a nice, beautiful letter. If you don't like that letter, you press refresh, and it'll construct a new one right there and then. I asked it, what are the 4 English learning outcomes for the state of New York, and could you write me a paragraph which a grade 4 student could write and achieve all 4 of those outcomes? Boom, done. Would you please write me a 4-question multiple choice test with answer key? Done, instantly. Can you write me one question that would show deeper understanding on this paragraph? Sure, and here's why it's deeper understanding. Okay? It is probably one of the most powerful pieces of software that I have ever seen in my life. It's absolutely mind-blowing. So it's here, okay? So one of the things we just better all understand right here and now, you put any mathematical equation there, anything, and it'll show you how to do it. It'll even explain how to do it. If your mom is a physicist, or if you happen to open ChatGPT, and you know what, before we even go away here tonight, I will put ChatGPT up on that screen, and if you want to see what it can do, we'll do it right here today, because you need to know this. I don't mean to sound that way, like what I just said there, that kind of sounded rude, but you do. You need to know it, because we are there, okay? So, who's doing it? What one family might consider helping, the other family might say, I think that's mom doing it for you. Students do copy and plagiarize homework when it's scored. So that's reason number 2 why we should question the grading of homework. Okay? If anybody wants to hang around for ChatGPT, I'm in. Very few university professors check homework, like we've done in high school and middle school. We might want to get our freshmen, sophomore, juniors, seniors, maybe our middle school students, we might want to get them ready for that environment, if that's where you want them to go. Because do you think it does a student any good to have their homework checked carefully and graded carefully in grade 12, and the very next educational environment they go to, no one could care less about checking their homework? I don't want that for my kids. Thankfully, very, very few of their teachers at Summerland Secondary graded homework. They encourage it. My daughter does it. There's no grade for the homework she's doing. So I watch it with my very eyes. That's a volleyball practice. Okay? You can tell they don't have numbers on their jerseys. There's a coach standing there. This is a volleyball game. Okay? Sports seems to figure this out really well. You practice volleyball to prepare for the volleyball game. It's a really simple relationship. What if we practiced our learning for the game, which might be that inside class demonstration of understanding? That would make more sense to me. I had a student tell me this one time. I just get really good grades on projects and homework, Mr. Dueck, but not on tests. Like this test that we've been doing in class, like, oh, I just get all flustered, and it's you know, I said, why do you have this? And she, what do you think she said to me? I have test anxiety. Right, test anxiety. So, true story. I can feel bad for her, right? Test anxiety. I got some questions about it, but then that Friday we have a big volleyball game in our school. Big volleyball match, right? Like senior girls team against the crosstown rivals, and she's playing volleyball, right? And it's 24-24, in a big playoff game, and she goes back to the end line, and she grabs the ball like this, and she gets ready to do a jump serve. I'm like, is she gonna do a jump serve at 24-24 in a packed gymnasium for the biggest game of the year? And she does. She just goes back there, throws that ball up, just comes through and hammers it. Team's cheering. They go on to win, but there's one dude in the bleachers going, Anxiety, hey? We're going to have a little chat about this Monday morning, right? So she comes in Monday and I said, hey, big game. Hey, Sarah? She's like, yeah, nice win on Friday, for sure. Jump serve at 24-24. Got to be stressful doing something like that, hey? She goes, yeah. I said, I was wondering something when I was watching that game. Who practices your jump serves? She goes, what? But like when you do those jump serves, there must be a lot of practice involved in that for you to have the confidence to serve in front of the whole town at 24-24. Who practices them? She goes, that's the silliest question anyone's ever asked me. I practice them. I said, oh, okay. So you handle the pressure in the moment through the practice you've done. Yeah. Who's doing your History 12 homework, do you think? She's like, looks at me. We do it with a few friends and that, like, kind of do it together. I said, if you start doing your own History 12 homework, I bet you won't have nearly as much test anxiety. I bet you could do it just like volleyball. And that's the biggest reason I've switched that kind of homework idea. I think there's kids, please hear me out here. There are definitely students that have anxiety when it comes to testing situations. But most of the research that I looked into on that, and this is just one example, you can find, I've gone deep into this topic. How do you help someone through anxiety? Do you run away from it? You teach them. What else do you do with anxiety? You may know.
You do little steps to experience what it's going to be, back off, and then go back in.
Yeah, experiential learning. If you're anxious about crossing the street, nobody comes up to you and says, don't cross streets. You work through it. So on 7 ways to overcome fear and anxiety, number 5 is don't avoid things. So I do not support this notion when I go to school district after school district that says, well, we've been grading homework, Myron. We've been grading it because our kids, like a lot of them aren't good test takers. They don't like taking tests, and then the homework is what gets them through the course. I said, yeah, but how do you know who's doing it? And is that setting them up for success for the next environment? I don't think so. So I have an alternative to share with you, because I still think homework's important. It's important. But I would just like to propose that we stop grading identical assignments done outside of our classrooms. That's my proposal. We stop that as soon as we can. And in our school district, we largely have. There might be a few remnants here and there of people doing it, but next to gone. Here's one of the teachers that led the way on this, and I want to explain what he's doing. This is Ben Curry. He teaches senior chemistry. Many of his students go on to universities, some of the top universities in North America. Here's what he did. Together, him and I designed this. His students fill out a homework planning form. Hey, Katie, what homework are you thinking about doing? Well, I'm gonna do page 22. Some questions. I'm going to look up the answers on Mr. Curry's website. The answers are right there. As soon as you try the problem, you can go check how you're doing. And then she checks off whether she does it. And then if she didn't do it, she doesn't check it off. And if she did the next one, she does. But you know what Mr. Curry tells his students? And I've been there to see it, and I've done it myself in my class. I strongly encourage you guys, he would say, go work on those chemistry problems tonight. We tried them in class. You've got some practice ones. Guess what we're going to do first thing tomorrow morning when you're back here? Anybody want to guess? Yeah. Small quiz or a test. Let's check your understanding of what you did last night and how much you understand it. Is there any incentive to cheat and copy somebody else's? None. Because there's no points awarded for the homework that you did at home. But he does put into his grade book the first score that somebody will get on that test. That little short quiz. And then if that quiz didn't go your way, you'll notice on his form there, you can do a re-quiz on that because your first one was your first demonstration of understanding. You should probably get a chance to revisit that. Ben Curry has some of the highest achieving chemistry students in our district by far, and he hasn't graded a stitch of homework in the last 6 years. Not one bit. So I don't buy the argument that I have to grade it or no one will do it. You could still check that it's complete. You could have it be a ticket through the door. Can I see what you did last night? I didn't do anything. Okay, I'm going to note that. Let's see how you do on your quiz. You can still check it. You can still see if someone did it. You can talk to your students about it. You can take homework, bronze it, frame it, mail it to a friend. Do anything you want with it, but don't grade it. Because if we stop grading it, we can stop incentivizing the plagiarism, copying, and cheating. We've been incentivizing that for a little while. It's my opinion. So, you know what's nice about what Ben is doing and what a lot of other students are doing? I want everybody to know this, that There's been quite a bit of chatter in this district, this school, this area, and lots of others between these terms formative and summative. And I'm not trying to make anybody's job worse or better when I say this, but I'm going to tell you how I feel. Formative assessment should not be graded and put in a grade book. Summative assessments go into grade books. Formative, one of the best examples of formative assessment when you do it well is student homework. It's practice. I'm going to, like the person over there, you said risk-taking. I'm going to try something at home. I'm going to do something about this. But then when the students get to class, that's when we should be doing summative assessment. So anywhere I go, if somebody says, what's the difference between these two types of assessments? The only difference is this. What do you do with the data? The moment assessments go into a teacher's grade book, they're summative, by definition. And I know, I'm not trying to make Brian's life difficult or anybody else. I know around here there's been some shifting of that. They tried a 90-10. Now it's gone to a 75-25 because people, I think, need to get their head wrapped around this one a little bit. And that's one reason I think we want to hold an evening like this where at least I can share my opinion of this. But we have a 0-100 shift of formative to summative because by definition that's what it is. Right? Are there any thoughts on this homework piece? And I know this one can be a bit of a touch point, so I see a hand over there. Yeah.
So I would say that it's also equally important for students to find purpose or meaning. You can find design or creativity purpose or meaning to them.
Yes.
Because even with the formative and summative grading, I've seen where students can determine what exactly they need to complete or not complete to be able to get the score that they want at the end. So if this isn't weighted as heavily, it's not, they're not going to bother with it, it's not going to affect their reading and study in person.
Yeah, they make strategic decisions, right, on which things are more heavily weighted and which things are less. And just in case people couldn't hear you, especially maybe there's not people upstairs anymore, that they have to find meaning and relevancy in it. Anything else? Sorry, I'm just repeating a bit. Yeah, I completely agree. Any other thoughts on homework? I mean, you guys are parents. I mean, some of you have been in the education system. Some of you are coming from the workforce or companies or whatever. I'm curious. Anybody want to say, Myron, I think you're completely off base on this one, and here's why? I'd welcome anything. Yeah, and maybe I'll hand this around a little bit.
So my thoughts are, homework, as you said, is all about practicing, right? Practicing and learning. So with my daughters, what I did, like when they were younger, they weren't good at math. I'm an engineering background, so math is very important for me from a STEM perspective. So what they did is they weren't doing well in class, and so I gave them some extra work, like a website that does practicing math. And but the important part was that it was graded in the sense that the website would tell them if their answer is correct or wrong, because if they're not doing it right, they'll at least know how to correct it. So
they could find the answers on the website. Right?
Correct. Yeah. So they would solve the problem, and it would tell them if it was correct or not correct, and if it wasn't correct, it would explain how to solve it. But I just believed in a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And then when that practice happened, then they became a lot better at school as a consequence of the extra work that was given them at home.
Do I remember your name? Was it Omar?
EHAB.
Ehab, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I think Ehab, if I could wave that little proverbial magic wand, and if we just as a continent decided that homework is for practice, we'd take a huge step in the right direction. That's what it is. And I never sent my practice results into the local paper for my volleyball team. I never did. They don't care. Right?
I just felt that it gave them confidence.
Yeah.
Right? So I would give them extra work to do over the summer.
Sure.
In preparation for next year's class. So
Yeah.
third grade, they're going into fourth, they're doing fourth grade math in the summer. Then when they go into the class in fourth grade, they're ahead of the class because they did like half the curriculum over the summer.
Yeah,
And they felt confident and they could raise their hand, and it just kind of reinforced the positivity, right? And so the teacher thought, oh, hey, they're really good. So they raise their hand even more. So now they don't want to disappoint the teacher. So they work harder to keep the grades up. So that was more kind of psychology for me, just to give them the confidence, and then that reinforced itself.
Thank you. I'm going to get a mic over there. But you know what I think is key to what you said is they were doing it. I mean, that's the key piece. And there's nothing wrong with that practice. I bet it would really help them in understanding that.
When you were comparing the fact that when you're in college, you don't have your homework graded, you know, you're expected to do it, to prepare independently. To me, there is a variable that's not being factored in, which is maturity. And that the reason that you're not being graded at that point is you have the maturity, you've developed the skills, that you have the incentive at that point to do what you need to do to be able to do well in the class. But I'm not sure.
I hope it does. Screen mirroring, let's mirror our display. Let's go over to Chrome. Let's go to ChatGPT. Okay, can people see that? All right, there we go. Is there a way just to clear all this? A new chat. All right. So, does anybody have a question they would like to pose to the most powerful artificial intelligence bot that we've likely seen in a long, long time?
What are the top 10 skills to be successful in college?
In college, top 10 skills in college, yeah?
Is homework important for
Let's, okay, hang on. Let's see that. What are the top 10 skills for a college student? Okay. That's not fun. Is it blocked here, Brent? Man. Does anybody have it on their phone? That's too bad. That's going to
Can you
take
connect the internet through your phone?
What's that?
Isn't it on thing?
Your laptop over your phone?
I want to show you guys something here, because what I've done, give me a second. We're at my ChatGPT. This is gonna, you know, all I can say. I've got no. Maybe it's a Wi-Fi issue? No, I think it's not. Probably. Okay. Okay, guys. No fun with that. But, hold on. Know this. You know what I would strongly, okay, I have a couple suggestions. You can read them in my article. And I don't want to anger anybody when I say this, and I don't entirely blame districts that have blocked it, okay? Because some blocked it. I think they kind of hit the panic button and say, block this. I don't think that's a good long-term solution. I don't think it's a good long-term solution to an amazing piece of technology. Like I said, we had World Books, they came, then we had Encarta on a CD, then we had Google, and now we've got AI bots that can answer really, really intricate questions. But here's the thing, and you can look this up. You go home and have a read of it. ChatGPT gets a lot of things wrong. It's not necessarily correct. So far, it can't reference a piece of writing. I asked it to say, oh, by the way, I asked it about homework. It gave me 3 things this afternoon of why homework can be a good thing, and 3 things of where it can be problematic. So, because I kind of anticipated somebody might say, what would ChatGPT say? I asked it this question. In what ways did the United States try to exert global influence after the Second World War? And it was like 6 things. The United States set up military bases around the world. The United States gave financial incentives for countries if they would align with democratic values and so on. But you know what it didn't do on one of those things? Not on one did it substantiate or give you an example of where it occurred. So what would I do if I was teaching History 12 right now? I'd say get ChatGPT to weigh in on something and see how general it is. Okay, now you know what you have to do? You have to find a source that's going to back up or refute every single thing that ChatGPT just brought in. I want you to analyze that, and I want you to judge it. One of our... What's that?
Just you're like using ChatGPT in a way of like a tool.
Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful tool.
Yeah, you can't avoid exactly.
Lean into something. I called my friend up, Alex, my cousin earlier, who sells farm equipment, and he said, Myron, no, this is farm equipment that costs $1 million. But right now, the most advanced chemical sprayers on the planet made by John Deere implements will drive, the tractor drives itself by GPS. Farmer can be on their phone, reading a book. The only thing they have to do is they have to be in the cab because there's a motion sensor that it requires someone to be sitting there for legal purposes. That's the only reason. That tractor will make a turn on sub-inch accuracy, okay? Less than an inch accuracy. So that if you planted a kernel of corn here in your field this year, next year that tractor will plant that kernel of corn 1 inch and 3/4 over. It can do it. Chemical spraying, there are cameras leading the entire chemical sprayer. The camera sees the weed, analyzes it, it's a dandelion, and a little Detrox 10 gets sprayed on that plant. It said this sprayer will pay itself off in 2 years on the largest of farms, and it's $1 million. That's how much you're going to save. He said, Myron, any school that is going to tell their students right now not to embrace AI technology is going to do them a massive disservice, because guess what? You have a choice. You either get on board and you start using these things, or you put your head in the sand and go, but kids are going to stop writing. No, they won't. No, they won't. And if they do, it's going to be because there's some shift that goes on societally that we might look back and go, oh, my doctor doesn't have to spend a lot of time writing up letters and rather they could see more patients. Well, that wouldn't be the worst thing, right? So, a couple things to think about. Global education, this is going to fit with this, guys, and these last two aren't nearly as involved, so we're actually getting there. Anybody know who this dude is, this guy?
Jack Ma.
Jack Ma, yeah. Jack Ma started Alibaba, and he's got a few dollars in the bank. And you may agree or disagree. You might see irony in what Jack Ma is about to say, being a billionaire. But I do want to throw his comments from the Davos World Economic Forum on the table when somebody asked him about education. I wanted to see what you think about this. It's just that kind of day, isn't it?
Challenge that. If we do not change the way we teach, 30 years later we'll be in trouble. Because the way...
We'll let him start again. That's my fault that time. That's my fault. I turned my volume up. Now, we might need a little more overall volume for this. I don't know. Let's try.
And by the way, education, it's a big challenge now. If we do not change the way we teach, 30 years later we'll be in trouble. Because the way we teach, the thing we teach our kids are the things the past 200 years is knowledge-based. And we cannot teach our kids to compete with machine who is smarter. We have to teach something unique. That is, machine can never catch up with us. In this way, 30 years later, our kids have the chance. I hope I answered your question.
It's a very difficult one to answer, but what are those skills that you think we need to teach? If we're moving away from knowledge, what are the key things?
Value, believing, independent thinking, teamwork, care for others. These are the soft part. The knowledge will not teach you that. Folks, that's why I think we should teach our kids on sports, the music, the painting, art. To making sure humans should be different from, everything we teach should be different from machine. If the machine can do better, you have to think about it.
So I'm going to include some of Jack Ma's thoughts in the handouts. If I was doing this with a group of teachers, which I often do, it's a great icebreaker at the beginning of the day, just to say, what do you disagree with here? What do you agree with? Or does it take your thinking in a particular direction? I mean, right off the bat, I think there's more to school likely than sports, music, painting, and art. I bet you if Jack Ma was here, he says probably examples. But what's occurring globally, you guys, and the descriptor for tonight is I want to make sure I get to some of this. I want to get to some of the global pieces that are going on, because sometimes we're a little insulated, and I get to travel all over the world and talk with people as to what's happening. Andreas Schleicher wrote this. This is a really, really good book that if you're looking for a summer read sometime, Amanda Ripley's book, The Smartest Kids in the World, is really interesting. She follows three students from the United States. One goes to South Korea, I think. Matt, have you read that book?
She's got like a 10-minute TED-style talk.
Okay.
An overview of the book. But yeah, 3 different cultures, Indian American students, and how they do it.
Yeah, one went to Poland, one went to Korea, and one went to Finland, I believe. And she just talks a lot about the American school system and what are some things that they're learning. One of the things I bumped into with her was she talks a lot about the PISA exam. And the PISA exam is given globally to grade 10 students, so that would be your sophomores, right? And it's super interesting. And the people who make this test are not after your answering of multiple choice questions, but they want to see who can think. And it's very, very interesting to see where country rankings end up here. And you also get your state rankings, by the way. New Jersey's going to have a ranking. They'll randomly take students. Have you guys ever been randomly picked for PISA? Our school got picked. And you got to go put them in a lab for 2 hours, and they take this PISA exam if you want to opt in. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of PISA questions, but they're incredibly hard to find because they're kind of locked down. But I'm going to give you one that Amanda shared in her book. I want to see how you would answer this question, okay? So they gave this one to grade 10s, 350,000 grade 10 students around the world. A TV reporter showed this graph and said the graph shows that there is a huge increase in the number of robberies from 1998 to 1999. If you look here, 98 to 99, you see some numbers up the side there, 505 all the way to 520, number of robberies a year. Do you consider the reporter's statement to be a reasonable interpretation of this graph and give an explanation as to why? 75% of respondents in this particular testing cycle said, yeah, that's reasonable. Okay. The answer is it's not reasonable, and there's about 10 reasons why it wouldn't be, including, well, this is just a shrunk down portion of this graph. It's 505 to 520. If you stretch that right out, they'd barely be different. You're not giving me any context for where these robberies will occur. How are these robberies measured? There's all these reasons that they could give, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of grade 10s struggle immensely to answer this question. Because you can't study it, you can't memorize this, you have to think your way through it. And lastly, number 5, it's going to be everybody's responsibility to teach our students to be competent and knowledgeable people. Everyone's responsibility, and I want to share some research with you tonight before we close up. I think many other people think this, that we're still kind of a carryover of the Industrial Revolution, where we were into efficiency and into systems and this word work that we use everywhere in our schools still. But you get to work. You guys have something to work on? Are you going to work on that at home tonight? That's an Industrial Revolution carryover as well. We should probably call it learning. We've seemed to compartmentalize the competencies. And what I mean by that is, oh, you want to see where problem solving goes on in Summerland Secondary or Morristown High School? Our math and science department does that. Oh, you want critical thinking? Yeah, probably psychology. Communication, we do that in English. And if you want to be creative, we put a play on every year. That's what I mean by compartmentalizing these competencies. And the evidence is in, folks. If you want to develop competencies, this can't be the reality in your school. What you need to do is this. You need to recognize that critical thinking is not a skill, it's a collection of skills. These most complex things are not things that are easily defined. And secondly, we don't transfer skills very well from one context to another. And I'm going to explain this one. You can learn a skill somewhere, but that doesn't mean you're going to apply that skill all over the place. Okay? Human beings have a funny way of being able to do something in the environment in which they learned it, but not necessarily be able to do it everywhere else just as well. And there's some really interesting studies on this. Here's one. They taught people math skills 30 feet below the water, and then they tested them later in a classroom and then with their scuba gear back on. And if they had their scuba gear on, they did better on those assessments than up in a classroom, because that's where they learned it. Have you ever felt this way? That something learned in a particular room is better recalled in that room? Because we're contextual learners. We can test this one in about a half hour. They're not allowed to do these studies anymore, but they did this study at a university in 1980. They had people slam 3 gin and tonics, and then they studied the map of the school, and then they tested whether you would better recall that map after 3 gin and tonics, or whether you would recall it better sober. And it turns out that things learned after consuming 3 drinks are better recalled after drinking 3 drinks. So I'm not suggesting you do that, but that's a really interesting study, okay? And they're not allowed to do those anymore. Where am I going with this? I'll tell you where I'm going with it. Here's a fact. If we want students to think critically in science, then we need to start having that be part of science instruction. Those things need to be linked. And if you want people to be creative in science, then you need to make that part of science instruction. And you could take the place of science there and say English, math, PE, art, all of those things. We are contextual learners. So saying that, oh, it's somebody else's job to teach critical thinking around here, it isn't. It's everybody's job. And there's now very, very strong evidence to support that. So, where I want to leave things here is one little piece, and then I can take other questions, we can end up getting out of here. Globally. So this is happening globally. And right here in New Jersey, if students are going to be competent, and they're going to be self-reporting on their learning, if that's really important, then the question is, what language do you think we should speak? And what I mean by language is this. Schools have a choice on what language they wish to use to reflect student learning. And that language could be broken down into grading system, labels, and levels of performance. Let's start with percentage grades. You could use percentages. What do the labels look like? The labels are 100, 99, 98, 97, 96, all the way down to 0. How many categories is that? Or levels of performance? 101. If you think about it for a second, it's 101. Just trust me on that. Is there 100? It's 101, okay? What about plus and minus letter grades? What do you think about those? Well, those are the ones where we've got A plus, A minus, B plus, all the way down to D's, and then finally to F. How many levels of performance are there? 13, okay? So what else is there? Well, you could choose letter grades, just straight letter grades without pluses and minuses. You go that, and there's 5. You could grab a proficiency scale. Right now I just finished in Roseville, California. We switched 280 teachers from the percentage grade system to a proficiency scale. It's going well in Roseville. Now I'm going to visit for my 4th week in Utah this week to go to Sevier School District, to go from a percentage system to a performance scale. And that could be something like exemplary, proficient, or not yet. Or you could be like beginning, developing, proficient, and extending, a bit like British Columbia, and that's going to be 3 or 4 levels. And finally, you could pull an MIT, or what some places have as a pass-fail. My friend who did air traffic control, by the way, he's an air traffic controller in New Zealand. It's pass-fail. You never walk up to someone as an air traffic controller and say, 98% of the time I get them in. Yeah, I'm really strong. That's not good enough, okay? It's pass-fail. So there's that and 2 categories. And this, I don't want to bore people too much with this, but if you're walking out of the movie theater after just seeing a film and someone says, so what'd you think of it? How many categories do you typically need to answer that question? Good or bad? 3 maybe? I might have a scale in my head, like 4 maybe. Like, that was one of the best movies I have ever seen. It was quite good. No, don't go. That might be 4. Tom Gusky argues this, and I think it's really, really important. What's your name again? Joelle. If Joelle and I go out to watch a movie, a bunch of friends are out there, we're all watching this film, and I turn to Joelle, and we both have a very similar feel with movies. We know that we both like kind of the same movies. So now I'm looking for reliability between her judgment and mine. And I say, Joelle, give me a percentage of what you think of Maverick, okay? Like, I need a percentage. What are the chances that I come up with the exact same percentage grade that Joelle does? What are the chances? Low. What if it was good or bad? High. All Tom Gusky argues is this. He puts a line there that we're going to call the reliability line. If you get much higher than 5 categories or 5 levels, your reliability goes out the window because there's just too many categories. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of districts are questioning percentage grading, because there's just too many darn categories. And if you want reliability, not only between teachers, but what if I grade 2 assignments and I'm trying to decide 97, 95? What if that was just exemplary? Or what if that was just the sophisticated category? Now my reliability goes way up because there's a really good chance I'm going to replicate that same thing. So that's a big, big reason why, and I'm going to flash some things across the screen here pretty quick. That's why IB has 4 levels. IB schools all around the world send students off to universities, workplaces. They have a scale that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but only 4 levels of descriptors. It's a very, very robust system. It works really well. I want to show you a scale that I'm very fond of. I work with a school in Monterrey, Mexico. They're a very, very high-functioning university prep school. They have a scale K to 12, and it's this one. Beginning, the student is in the process of acquiring. Approaching demonstrates basic knowledge. Meeting demonstrates an understanding, and extending, which I like this one, back to that, apply. They can transfer their skills to an area. So you learn something, and then it's got to be transferable to something new. You gotta take it and create or argue your point. So it's happening all over the place, you guys. And one of my good friends in education, Melanie Henning, I know that some of our grade programs do this. I know this does this a little bit at this school. If she has one suggestion for schools is stop converting this to percentages. Like once you have 4-level language, then just use that 4-level language. Once you've got 3 levels for rating a movie, then just use those 3 levels for rating a movie. Don't say, okay, I think that would be about a 78%. Just stop saying that. That's why nobody wants to have that conversation with you. So stop converting would be her suggestion. And to finish things off here, I'm going to share a couple things that our parents found the most valuable, and I'm going to take any questions and all that. When we were in COVID, and we were doing learning, a very frustrated teacher said in one of our Zoom chats, I can't use my multiple choice questions. Kids are just Googling the answer at home. Right? A lot of teachers experience that. But there was a teacher in that chat that said, do you think maybe this is a sign we need to change something that we're doing? Like, just saying, like, Brian said right off the bat, COVID seemed to like change a few things, and maybe this is what we need to do. So when I offered Summerland Secondary Grade 9 parents to come to a meeting, because we're going to be changing our grading from percentage to just one of 4 words. We have 100 grade 9 students in our school. Our school's about 450 students total, so 100 and something. 75 parents showed up, so 75% of our families showed up for that meeting. And the feedback I got was this was the most beneficial slide to them. And it's this. I asked them, people who came to the meeting, how many people have largely come to this meeting tonight in Summerland because you're thinking to yourself, what's wrong with percentage grades? Like, we all had them when we were in school. I said, yeah, hands went up all over the place. I said, so give me some examples of things you learned when you were in school. And hands started going up. Well, we did, I don't know, did spelling tests, we did those. We filled things in on a map. Yeah, I said, keep going, keep going. What else? I said, do you notice what you're all talking about right now? We're talking about things that would be easy to Google if we had had it. Our schooling system was built upon these verbs: define, memorize, repeat, list. That's what we went to school with. That was a large part of my schooling. The world is shifting to verbs like this in our learning standards. Evaluate, justify, design, generate. That is what kids in the 21st century must be able to do. So I said to anybody who came to this room today, wondering what's wrong with percentages, nothing's wrong with them. They're wonderful when they stay in their lane over there. If you have a schooling system that's built on those things, percentage works just fine. You got 48 out of 50 on your US map, I can give you a percentage. It's actually pretty accurate. Descriptors are better for that. And a lot of the work I do with schools is around rubric design, describing what you're going to get in that design or that piece. Because this is where it's at, and this will be in your handouts. This is really good for pure content, and this over here is much better for developing skills using that content. You're going to have content either way. You're going to have biology content in biology, you're going to have chemistry content in chemistry, and social studies in social studies. That's a given. The big question is, what are you going to do with it? And I think that's where there's some shifts that are going on in education. So, just to finish, I've been driving that volleyball team around for years now, my son and his friends, and once in a while there would be somebody who said, I got 100%. And if you just listen to them talk, they may as well finish that with, and I'm done. Yep, I got 100%. Just hear it. The thing is, when machines learn, like ChatGPT, it's got to fail about 15% of the time to get smarter. Newsweek reported recently that people are the same way. We got to struggle about 15% of the time. If you struggle all the time, you're going to get frustrated and want to quit. If you're always successful, it might be too easy. So guess what? We're not even shooting for 100% anymore. It's not actually the goal. The goal is to learn, and that should largely guide our language around assessment. So when I read this book, Shoot for the Moon by James Donovan, I loved it. And the thing is, the best scientists in the world never ever use language like, I'm 100%. So there is no finish line. And that's why I think maybe we should all feel like we're beginning once in a while. And in my district, the next big push I'm going to do is I want to try to get that learning cycle to be circular and not linear. Because I think that's where it's actually at. So how about I at least stop the dripping tap, right about here, in case it's like, man, I can't take one more thing. But I would certainly take questions and I would take thoughts. I have other things in case the question goes there, but that was my attempt tonight to just share 5 things that if I was a parent, those are 5 things I'd like to know. And so I put myself in the shoes of a parent tonight, and whether I succeeded or not, I don't know, that's up to you. But my goal was to just try to share some things that a parent would find useful.